Hi everyone, today my persuasive speech is going to be on mandatory school uniforms to be implemented into public school systems. So my purpose of the speech is to persuade my audience that mandatory school uniforms are more beneficial for students because it decreases distractions, provides structure and professionalism for the students and faculty. My thesis statement, mandatory school uniforms are more beneficial for students because it decreases distractions, provides structure in the schooling system, and shows the students' professionalism. So why do I believe public schools should adopt mandatory uniforms? Three main reasons: it provides structure, shows professionalism, and it decreases a lot of distractions in the classrooms. My first source is a book, and it speaks on the topic of school uniforms and the challenges that it comes with in public schools. Um, in the research of the uniforms having an impact on student behavior, it ended up increasing attendance, less competition over clothing, and had an improvement on learning because students had a stronger ability to focus on school rather than each other's clothes and shoes. However, there were people that were not agreeing and felt that it was violating students' free speech rights and it did not solve the problems the policy was intended to do, such as bullying. My sources 2 and 3, there was a scholar article that stated positivity on this policy, such as the increased focus on academics rather than the newest clothes trends. There was a newspaper article from the USA Today on school uniforms stating statistics and people's opinions on the topic. It ranges from people saying that they hate it to people that ended up saying that it ended up decreasing stress on what students would buy or wear for school every day. My sources 4 and 5, I ended up finding a blog. I really love blogs. I enjoy reading a lot of personal information. There was a blog written by Claire on how moms actually felt, and there's some certain pros and cons that she wrote that I will speak on about the school uniforms. And then my last resource that I had, it was a YouTube clip from a Today Show that was a debate on school uniforms between two experts, Michelle Borba, who is an educational psychologist, and Robin Silver, who is a child and teen development specialist. And Michelle stated that school uniforms are a good idea and reduces bullying, distractions, and decreases gang-affiliated things in schools, where Robin had disagreed with her and stated that students should have the right to their individuality. Okay, so before we move to my conclusion, I'm going to go back. So for my first source on the book, so the book was actually called The Challenge of Mandating School Uniforms in the Public Schools, Free Speech, Research, and Policy. The authors were Roman and Littlefield. So basically in this book, it was just explaining how students would have a less of worrying about competition between who would have the better shoes, who has the better clothes, and it implemented more of a structure in the classroom where instead of a young boy looking at someone else's shoe and thinking, oh, I wish I could afford those, or just not focusing more on the schoolwork and more focusing on how everybody else is looking around them if there was no school uniforms implemented. There were also those people that were saying that it was going against the free speech rights for students to, express themselves through their clothing. And where I could see where they're coming from, I also feel like at that point, school isn't really a place that you want to implement those kind of rights, you're still in like a professional environment, and in professional environments sometimes you kind of have to step back and um, be more a better person that you would be by yourself. Just a show of more of a professionalism. For the article that I found, it also just stated some pros and cons on schools adopting this mandatory school uniforms. The article was very positive, and they noticed that there was actually an increase in academics with students that the uniforms were implemented in that school. Their grades ended up increasing, their attendance were increasing, but it also had stated that in the state of California, there was laws that allowed students to opt out of a uniform for several reasons, such as violating speech, free speech rights, or religious reasons, or of that nature. So, for the newspaper article on USA Today, it was a very short article that I had found, maybe about half a page long. People don't really read the newspaper as often as we should now. And it basically just had people saying that they either hated it, it just took away from their child's individuality, once again, another argument that's brought up. Or there was actually people that are all for it and said that it developed structure and less stress on the child figuring out what to wear the night prior, not stressing about, oh, mom, dad, what am I going to wear tomorrow? People are making fun of the same shoes that I wear, etc. For the blog written by Miss Claire, she actually had some moms speak on this topic. You always want to hear from the moms. So, one mom, Miss Carol O'Neill, from Scotland, actually agreed and said, I am totally for school uniforms, as they keep children dressed the same and stop all of the nonsense with kids wearing designer gear. If kids are dressed the same, then they are less likely to be bullied. I would definitely agree with her. You're not going to school to be worried about what someone else is wearing, because everybody is ideally in the same uniform. And then there was someone that actually disagreed and said, this was Miss Eduarda Scrutner from Chandler, Arizona. She said that uniforms can be a financial burden for poor families. So that was another thing that would arise, is that where would this cost come from if parents weren't able to afford them? Would the government fund it? Do parents have to come out of pocket? Those kind of situations. Some pros that came from the blog. So according to a 2010 University of Houston research paper, Dress for Success, the effect of school uniforms on student achievement and behavior, student attendance was most likely to improve if students wore uniforms. In 2002, a National Association of Elementary School Principals research ended up claiming that uniforms actually encourage discipline. And then in 1996, there was a Sage research article called School Uniforms and Safety, and it correlated that there was a reduction of violence in schools when there was actually a school uniform implemented. I thought a cool fun fact that I actually found was that even former President Bill Clinton was all for this. In 1996, during a speech in March, he actually said, quote, if it means that the school rooms will be more orderly and more disciplined, and that our young people will learn to evaluate themselves by what they are on the inside instead of what they're wearing on the outside, then our public schools should be able to require their students to wear uniforms. So just more focusing on, if there was school uniforms implemented, then students would be more focused on their schoolwork instead of focusing on what other people are wearing. And then people will actually end up liking others for their actual character instead of them wearing the coolest clothes or the coolest shoes. Okay, so in conclusion, mandatory school uniforms are more beneficial for students because it decreases distractions, bullying, and so much more that we went over. From reviewing all of the following references that were presented, it is obvious that school uniforms can do more good in public school systems. The statistics, a testimonial from the children's psychologist in the YouTube video that I have linked on my references, and even comments from the mothers that came from the blog all concluded to my thesis. A law to implement school uniforms through the nation can actually make a huge impact and difference in our future generations.